I was halfway through pulling out a chair at my sister's birthday dinner when she put her hand on the back of it and pushed it closed. The restaurant was quiet enough that her voice carried farther than she intended when she said, "You're not classy enough to sit with us. Go sit over there." She pointed to a small, empty table in the corner like she was assigning me a punishment. People at nearby tables turned. My mother stared down at her napkin. My father touched his water glass but didn't speak. Clark, my sister's husband, laughed under his breath as if her insult was an inside joke. I stood there feeling the weight of every pair of eyes watching me. The humiliation was sharp, but it didn't crush me. It did something else. It lit a slow, steady burn in my chest. A burn I had learned to swallow for years. I walked to the corner table without saying a word, because revenge doesn't need to be loud. It just needs the right moment. 10 minutes later, as I sat alone with only a glass of water in front of me, the waiter walked back carrying something hidden behind his arm. When he placed it on my table, the entire room shifted. My family froze. Conversations stopped, and my sister's face drained of all color. That was the moment the night turned. My name is Taryn Locke, and I grew up being the family member people leaned on but never looked at. I was the one who showed up early, helped clean afterward, and stayed quiet when others took credit. My sister Danica, on the other hand, thrived on attention. She loved being admired, envied, and placed above everyone else, including me. Our mother always said things like, "Your sister has higher standards. Don't take it personally." Our father tried to stay neutral, but usually slipped into silence whenever conflict formed. And Clark, Danica's husband, made sure everyone knew which side of the table he sat on. The expensive, well-lit side. Tonight was supposed to be a birthday celebration I planned and paid for. I chose the restaurant, made the reservation, ordered the cake, and left notes in the system to make everything perfect. It had been my attempt to do something generous for a sister who had given me very little kindness in return. But generosity means nothing when the people receiving it believe they're above you. From the moment I walked in, Danica's comments dug at me. "You should have dressed better. Try not to make this awkward. This place is elegant, Taryn. Don't act out of place." Every sentence was meant to push me a little lower than she already believed I was. When I pulled out the chair next to her, she took her chance to make it public. "You're not classy enough to sit with us." Her words were sharp, but the silence from my family hurt more. No one questioned her. No one told her to stop. They just let me walk to the corner table like that was where I belonged. I sat there, feeling the sting of humiliation mix with anger I had swallowed my whole life. But as the minutes passed, the anger settled into something calmer, something colder, a type of clarity that doesn't shake your voice but sharpens it. The waiter approached me quietly and asked, "Are you sure you're meant to be sitting alone?" I nodded, even though I knew I shouldn't have accepted that fate. His eyes flicked toward the main table, then back to me with a look that told me he understood more than my own family did. He walked away with purpose. My sister didn't notice. She was too busy posting photos and laughing loudly at jokes that weren't funny. She believed nothing could touch her as long as she was the center of attention. She had no idea she had already lost control of the night. 10 minutes later, the waiter returned carrying something that belonged only to me, something that exposed the truth she had tried to hide, something that turned the entire restaurant against her without me saying a single word. That was the beginning of the payback she never saw coming. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. As I sat alone at the corner table, the noise of the restaurant sharpened around me instead of blending into the background. Forks clinked against plates. Wine glasses chimed. Soft music played above us. Yet all I could focus on was the golden-lit table where my family sat without me, shining under the chandelier like they belonged there more than I ever could. Danica laughed loudly, tilting her head back in the exact dramatic way she did when she wanted attention. Clark leaned in close to her, whispering something that made her smirk and flick her eyes in my direction, as if I wasn't far enough away already. My mother adjusted the pearl bracelet on her wrist, glancing at me only when she thought I wasn't looking. My father stared at the menu like it held the answers to all the discomfort he refused to face. The scene wasn't chaotic. It wasn't loud. It was cold, controlled. designed, and I felt the weight of it press into my spine. I had planned the evening as a gift, yet somehow I had become the outsider in a space I paid for. The insult wasn't just the words my sister used. It was the willingness of everyone at that table to let them stand. That was the part that stung deeper than anything she said, the permission they gave her to treat me like I was beneath them. The waiter approached their table first, and I watched the interaction unfold like a scene I wasn't allowed to enter. He asked if they were ready to order. Clark answered for the whole group, choosing the most expensive appetizers without consulting anyone. My mother chimed in with her preference for imported sparkling water. Danica ordered a cocktail she couldn't pronounce correctly, but pretended she could. They acted like royalty, the type of customers who believed the restaurant was lucky to have them. The waiter nodded politely, but I saw something flicker in his expression, a tightening around the eyes, a small shift in how he held the notepad. He didn't like what he was seeing. He didn't like the way they glanced at me as if I was something they found stuck to their shoe. When he walked toward me to ask if I'd like to order anything, his tone softened. That kindness almost made me break. I managed to say, "Just water for now." He nodded like he understood why that was the only thing I could bring myself to request. But the truth was simpler. I didn't want to order a full meal and sit there pretending everything was normal. I didn't want to eat with a throat tight from humiliation. From my table, I heard Clark say, "She shouldn't order anything fancy. She can't afford places like this." Danica laughed, delighted by the cruelty. She wanted everyone around her to know she was above me. She wanted strangers to believe it too. She didn't realize that she was exposing herself more than she exposed me. The waiter paused mid-step, clearly hearing it. He turned slightly, just enough to see me across the room. I kept my face calm, but something in my eyes must have told him the truth. This wasn't new. This wasn't a rare moment. This was a pattern, a lifetime of being positioned one step beneath everyone else. Then the dinner conversation escalated. My mother said something about how I never understood fine dining. My father commented on how I should really try harder to dress for the occasion next time. Every remark layered insult on top of insult. And Danica completed the portrait by loudly telling the server that we were celebrating her birthday and her achievements, while throwing a dismissive glance toward my table. The waiter's jaw tightened again. It was subtle but unmistakable. Something inside him clicked. He walked away quickly, heading toward the kitchen with purpose. I didn't know what he planned to do, but I sensed he was no longer just a bystander. He had seen enough to know who deserved respect and who didn't. Meanwhile, I sat perfectly still, letting every humiliation imprint itself on my memory. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to rush out. I wasn't going to beg for a place at their table. If they wanted to treat me like a nobody, then I would let them, because I knew something they didn't. I knew what I had done before arriving. I knew what the reservation folder held. I knew who had actually paid for every bite of food they were about to eat. And soon, they were going to know it too. Waiter disappeared behind the kitchen door with a level of urgency that didn't belong to someone simply grabbing drinks. It was the urgency of someone who had decided a line had been crossed. I didn't know what he planned to do, but I felt the shift in the air the moment he slipped out of sight. The restaurant kept moving around me, but something inside the room tightened. Clark and Danica continued their performance at the main table, laughing loudly, ordering cocktails they couldn't pronounce, bragging about vacations they never paid for, and posing for photos as if the world revolved around their reflection. Every time the camera flash lit up, I felt a familiar ache run through me. Not sadness, not jealousy, something deeper, sharper, colder. My mother glanced toward me once, her face tight, like she knew the situation had spiraled into something uglier than she expected. Yet she still did nothing. My father cleared his throat occasionally, pretending to read the menu even though he had already ordered. Their silence wasn't accidental. It was practiced. Years of avoiding conflict had shaped them into bystanders. The kind of people who didn't create storms, but didn't stop them either. But I wasn't the daughter who swallowed their silence anymore. I had swallowed too much already. When the waiter finally reappeared, he wasn't carrying a tray. He wasn't holding drinks. He wasn't smiling politely the way restaurant workers are trained to. Instead, he was holding the black reservation folder I had signed earlier that evening, the one that confirmed the deposit I paid, the one that held the instructions I left for the cake, the one that bore my name in neat handwriting at the top. He walked toward me first, not toward them, not toward the table dripping with entitlement. He came straight to me, his steps firm but controlled, stopping at the corner table like he had been waiting his whole shift to hand this back to the right person. He placed the folder in front of me with care and said quietly, "Whenever you're ready, Ms. Locke." Ms. Locke. He said it with respect, the kind of respect my own family refused to give me, the kind of respect Danica tried to keep from me. I opened the folder just enough to see the top page. My full name, my signature, the deposit amount, the notes I added to make the night special. A slow heat slid through my chest, but it wasn't humiliation this time. It was power, silent, rising power. The waiter straightened, adjusted his vest, and then turned toward my family's table with a new posture, purposeful, uncompromising, almost surgical. He approached them not as a server, but as a witness ready to present evidence. Clark barely looked up, assuming the waiter was bringing more drinks. Danica smoothed her hair as if preparing to be admired again. My mother folded her hands. My father shifted in his seat, sensing something was coming, but unsure what. The waiter stopped at the head of the table, glanced once at me to make sure I was steady, and then cleared his throat. The room around us hushed slightly, the way it does when a performer steps into the spotlight. But he wasn't about to entertain them. He was about to expose them. He began with, "Before we continue service, there is something the entire table needs to know." His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm enough that nearby tables slowed their conversations. Danica's smile faltered. A subtle twitch pulled at the corner of Clark's mouth. My mother's shoulders stiffened. My father lifted his eyes from the tablecloth for the first time in 10 minutes. The waiter continued, "There seems to be confusion about who this reservation belongs to." The words hit the air like a warning bell. Clark laughed awkwardly and said, "It's hers," gesturing toward Danica. Danica tilted her chin and nodded, already preparing to take credit for the evening. The waiter didn't even look at her. He said, "That is incorrect." The table froze. Forks paused mid-air. The restaurant quieted even more. The waiter spoke clearly, each word crisp and piercing. "This reservation was made by Ms. Taryn Locke. She paid the full deposit. She pre-ordered the special dessert. She arranged your seating." He let that last line hang long enough for its cruelty to settle. Shock rippled across the table. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My father's mouth parted slightly. Clark blinked hard, as if he needed the words repeated. But Danica looked like someone had ripped the floor out from beneath her. Her face lost its practiced confidence. Her eyes darted to me, then to the folder, then back to me again, searching for a way to twist the situation into her favor. But there was none. Not this time. The waiter wasn't finished. He added, "And she was also the one you moved to the corner." The entire table shifted. The waiter's voice didn't rise or sharpen. It remained steady, respectful, unshakable. Exactly what my family had never been for me. This was the turning point. The exact moment where humiliation no longer sat on my shoulders, but on hers. The moment the waiter finished speaking, the restaurant shifted into a strange, heavy stillness, like everyone had collectively inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. I watched the truth drop over the table like a stone sinking through water. Danica's fingers tightened around her wine glass until her knuckles went pale. Clark's smug confidence cracked into confusion as he stared at the waiter, then at me, then back at the folder lying open on my table. My mother whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath, and my father sank into his chair as if the weight of what he had allowed now sat squarely on his shoulders. The waiter stepped aside, giving them space to absorb what they had done. For years, I had swallowed humiliation in small doses, but this moment made every piece of it rush back through me, not as pain, but as vindication. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand up. I didn't need to. The truth had been delivered cleanly and publicly by someone who had no reason to lie for me, and the room had witnessed all of it. Then came the part they weren't prepared for. The manager approached with a small, elegant dessert cart, the type restaurants only bring out for special occasions. He pushed it straight past my sister's table, without hesitation, stopping directly in front of me. A single spotlight from above gave the cake a soft glow as he lifted the lid and revealed a custom message in delicate chocolate lettering. "Happy birthday, Danica," from Taryn. Gasps fluttered through surrounding tables. The manager then turned toward Danica and said, "This was arranged and paid for by your sister. She wanted this evening to be special for you." His tone wasn't kind. It wasn't sympathetic. It was disappointed. It was the tone you use when addressing someone who has failed a test everyone else passed with ease. Danica's face collapsed in on itself. The color drained from her cheeks so completely she looked like she might faint. She wasn't embarrassed because of the cake. She was embarrassed because the truth made her look small, smaller than she had ever worked to make me feel. Clark tried to recover their dignity by clearing his throat and muttering, "This is unnecessary. She could have said something earlier instead of making a scene." The manager cut him off immediately. "She did not make a scene. She sat quietly while you excluded her from an event she paid for. The scene is yours." That shut him up faster than anything I could ever say. People at nearby tables began whispering to each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others staring at my sister with open disgust. A woman at the table beside them murmured, "Shameful," loud enough for Danica to hear. My sister looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. The waiter wasn't finished. He addressed them again, his voice steady. "We value all guests equally. Mistreating someone, especially the person hosting your evening, is unacceptable in our establishment." Every word felt like a lash across Danica's ego. She had always been protected by appearances, by the image of being the put-together, admired older sister. But in this moment, the facade shattered. She reached forward with shaky hands and said, "Taryn, I didn't mean it like that." Her voice cracked. It wasn't remorse. It was panic. The panic of someone realizing they had finally gone too far. I looked at her calmly and said, "You meant every word. You just never expected anyone to call you out." Her eyes widened, and Clark looked away, unable to support her because there was no angle to manipulate now. The truth was too clean, too public, too undeniable. The waiter then gestured toward my table. "Ms. Locke, would you like us to move your cake to the larger table, or would you prefer to enjoy it here?" That question was the final blow, because it gave me control, power, choice. The very things my sister had spent years trying to deny me. I kept my gaze steady as I answered, "Leave it here. This is my table." A wave of quiet approval rolled through the diners. Some nodded, a few even smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something settle inside me. Not triumph, something purer, justice. The manager placed a fresh set of dessert plates on my table and bowed his head slightly in respect. As he walked away, the restaurant resumed its quiet hum, but nothing was the same. Danica sat frozen. Clark's jaw was tight. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My father stared straight ahead as if replaying every moment of silence he had ever given her. And me? I didn't feel small. I didn't feel out of place. I didn't feel like the girl who had been shoved to the corner. I felt centered, rooted, recognized. The climax was not the cake or the announcement. It was watching the truth force them to see me clearly for the first time in their lives. When the restaurant finally settled back into its natural rhythm, the echoes of what happened still hung in the air like smoke. The waiter returned only briefly to refill my water, offering a respectful nod that felt more meaningful than any words my family could give me. I sat at my small corner table, the one they had decided I was classy enough for, and took a slow breath as the reality of the night unfolded across the room. My family stayed frozen in place, unsure whether to speak, move, or even look at one another. Danica stared at her untouched drink, the ice melting into a pale, diluted reflection of the confidence she had walked in with. Clark kept adjusting the cuff of his shirt, like he needed something to control before the shame swelled too high. My mother opened her mouth a few times, as if she might finally say something that resembled an apology, but the words wouldn't come out. My father's shoulders slumped as though he finally recognized the part he played in all of this. Not through cruelty, but through the kind of silence that wounds quietly for years. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I needed their validation. I didn't need them to understand me, accept me, or see me as worthy. The entire restaurant had witnessed what they had done, and the truth had cut through every excuse they might have used to pretend it was harmless. That victory didn't come from anger. It came from clarity. After a few minutes, my mother gathered the courage to stand and walk toward my table. She moved slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal she feared might turn on her. But I wasn't wounded. Not anymore. She reached my table and placed a hand on the back of the empty chair. "Taryn," she said softly, "this wasn't right. We shouldn't have let her talk to you like that." I didn't respond immediately because I wanted the silence to sit between us long enough that she felt what it was like to be the one left waiting. When I finally lifted my gaze, I said, "You didn't let her talk to me like that. You watched her do it." Her face crumpled, not from anger but from realization. My father joined her, his voice tight as he said, "We failed you tonight. And not just tonight." He wasn't wrong, but the sudden awareness of their failure didn't undo the years of effort I had put into trying to belong in a place that kept pushing me toward the edges. I nodded, acknowledging their attempt without offering forgiveness they hadn't earned yet. Forgiveness would come only when change did. Clark stayed seated, clearly unwilling to approach me. For someone who thrived on dominance, losing control in public was something he couldn't process. Danica eventually stood, her posture trembling in a way I had never seen before. She walked over like someone inching toward a cliff, unsure whether to jump or step back. When she reached my table, she pulled out the chair across from me, but she didn't sit until I gave a small, indifferent nod. She folded her hands tightly and stared at the table before whispering, "I shouldn't have said that. I don't know why I did." I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said, "You said it because you meant it. You've always meant it." Her eyes lifted, wide and glossy. She shook her head, trying to deny it, but she knew better. The truth was too fresh, too raw. "I didn't think anyone would hear," she said. I leaned forward just slightly and replied, "That's the problem. You act differently when you don't think anyone is watching." She broke then, the tears spilling down her face in a way I had never witnessed. Not because she hurt me, because the mirror had finally been held up to her. She pressed a hand over her mouth and said, "I don't want to lose you." I sat back, calm and controlled, and answered, "You shouldn't have treated me like someone you were willing to lose." She nodded over and over again, as if the act alone could undo what happened. The night didn't end with hugs or forced reconciliation. It ended with honesty, and honesty is far sharper than forgiveness. My parents moved their things to my table. The waiter discreetly added extra dessert plates. My father tentatively reached for the cake knife and asked if he could serve the cake the way I intended. I allowed it, not because I wanted to comfort them, but because this moment belonged to me. I designed it. I paid for it. And finally, I was sitting at the table that should have been mine from the beginning. As they ate quietly, I felt something shift inside me. I was not the same person who walked into this restaurant hoping for approval. I learned that night that being dismissed can ignite a strength you never knew you had. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is forcing people to see who you truly are, not the version they made up to feel taller. When the night ended, I walked out without waiting for them. My steps were steady. My heart felt clean. And I didn't look back. Sometimes the table you are forced to sit at becomes the place where you finally reclaim yourself. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and comment where you're watching from.